I stopped just hiding myself and living in the shadows and actually step into the light and really share my story.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 heartbreaking reveals from celebrity memoirs.
It was just a life of abject poverty. It was a life of deprivation. That's what it was, a life of deprivation.
For this list, we'll be looking at some of the saddest hard truths stars divulged to the world in their own novels. What celebrity fact broke your heart? Let us know in the comments. Number 10. Shania Twain lost her voice when her husband left her.
You're still the one I want for life.
Shania Twain met her husband, music producer Robert John Mutt Lange, in June of 1993, and they were married in December of that same year. At some point in their 14-year marriage, however, Twain started to suspect that Lange was having an affair. This was a fear she discussed with one of her closest friends, Marianne Thiebaud. Little did she know, Thiebaud was the other woman. In Twain's 2011 autobiography, From This Moment On, the singer reveals that the pain and stress from the betrayal and separation caused her to lose the ability to project and garner any real volume from her voice.
It's going to take speech therapy, and it's going to take just relaxing, enjoying, laughing. It's a process. It's going to be a fairly long recovery there in that aspect.
Thankfully, she eventually got her voice back and found love again, ironically with the man Marianne Thiebaud was married to at the time of the affair. Number 9. Fantasia's functional illiteracy. When most contestants on American Idol are given a song that they don't know, they read the lyrics to learn it, not Fantasia Barrino. When she was given the song Summertime back in 2005 on season 3 of the competition show, Barrino was unfamiliar with it. In order to learn it, she listened to it over and over, memorizing the lyrics before her first rehearsal. It wasn't that she preferred doing it that way, but rather it was the only way she could.
Why am I holding back? Why am I being proud and saying I don't want nobody to know I went through that? So many people going through these things and a lot worse.
In her memoir, Life is Not a Fairy Tale, Barrino talks about her illiteracy and how the shame of it kept her from even trying to get a job. Luckily, learning songs has quite the convenient workaround.
I'm going to give my story. I'm going to tell the truth. I ain't holding back nothing. Just because it's going to help somebody. Might not help everybody, but to touch one person for me makes a difference.
Number 8. Brooke Shields' mother.
I set out to show all of it, you know, like I said, the good, the bad, the complexity of a parent-child relationship.
To say that the relationship between Brooke Shields and her mother Terry was important to the famous model and actress would be an understatement. The fact that she titled her memoir, There Was a Little Girl, The Real Story of My Mother and Me, should tell you how integral the relationship was to who she is. While Shields will be the first to say how much love there was to go around, her mother's alcohol use disorder was definitely something that took its toll on their relationship.
That shaped me. And so it actually became the larger character in our life, even in our lives together, and it even superseded Hollywood.
Unfortunately, these issues would span Shields' childhood and continue all the way up until Terry's passing in 2012.
And you are so honest about it in here.
It's pretty brutally, it's funny
it's very
too,
frank.
It's sort of ridiculous.
Number 7. Colton Haynes was encouraged not to come out of the closet.
He's not just part werewolf, he's part cannibal. And both parts are pissed.
While we're seeing more and more positive representations of LGBTQ+ characters and storylines in media, it's important to acknowledge the times we didn't, and the times actors were shunned for their sexuality. Teen Wolf actor Colton Haynes wrote in his memoir that he was almost fired from the show when MTV found out he had posed for photos in a gay magazine years earlier.
Basically, having to go back into the closet for my career was really damaging for me.
Haynes eventually came out to Entertainment Weekly in 2016. In an interview, he said that the reason he had tried to keep his sexuality hidden was because people in the business had told him that he would lose work if he came out.
I was just living for everyone else. I was never living for me. I was still figuring out who I am because I had to be so many different people.
Number 6, Leah Remini witnessed Scientology neglecting children. Leah Remini might be one of the most famous and outspoken ex-Scientology members on the planet.
I'm not a big fan of bullies, so it is part of who I am, and I was a fighter in the church. This is what they taught me, and so I'm going to continue my fight, but I'm on the right side of that fight now.
One of the most heartbreaking revelations the actress has made about Scientology is in regards to the treatment of children in the organization's midst. In her memoir, Troublemaker, Surviving Hollywood and Scientology, Remini wrote about how children are often left to care for themselves, since they're seen as not needing protection or guidance.
My story pales in comparison to what happened to other people, how people are bullied into silence.
You can imagine the conditions of neglect then. We won't go into detail here, but if you're curious about Remini's experience, her memoir is well worth the read.
Well, it's for the victims. It's for the people who have spoken out, but it's also for people who just maybe don't have the strength to fight, feel they don't have a voice.
Number 5, Drew Barrymore's substance use disorder. To most people in the 80s, Drew Barrymore was the cute little girl from E.T. the Extraterrestrial, but to many in Hollywood, she was the hard partying girl who, by the age of 13, was already doing her first stint in rehab.
People were laughing and just saying, you know, I dare you to do this, and I did, and I got really drunk. And it was such a scary, frightening feeling, yet it was such an escape from everything else in the world that I had a very liking to it.
At 14, she had her second go at rehab, and at 15, she was emancipating herself from her parents and moving into her own apartment. It might seem crazy for a 15-year-old to write a memoir, but by that age, Barrymore had already lived a life's worth of experiences. Her book, Little Girl Lost, hit store shelves not long after.
And you're just living a day at a time?
Yes, 1 minute, 1 moment.
We wish you well, and it's good to see you look well. It's good to see a young person come out the other side. It must have taken a great deal of fortitude, strength, and intelligence.
Number 4, Ashley Judd's experiences. The Judd family name has been part of popular culture for decades. Starting in the 80s, the Judds, Naomi and daughter Winona, made it big as a country duo. In the 90s, Winona's non-musical half-sister Ashley Judd appeared on our screens for what would be the beginning of a very successful career as an actress.
You're not very good at keeping promises, Nick.
You gonna do something? What are you talking to me for? She's the one with the gun.
But for Ashley, growing up a Judd wasn't all fame and glory. In fact, as she revealed in her 2011 memoir, there was a lot of darkness in her childhood.
You do talk about being diagnosed with depression earlier on in life.
Her mother and sister would often go on tour without her, leaving Ashley feeling neglected and isolated. And even worse, Judd writes about being mistreated by multiple men, one being a family member who she doesn't name.
But people are very, very interested in this and your childhood because you haven't spoken about it really before.
And I've been wholly unprepared for it. I really have been.
Number 3, Viola Davis grew up poorer than poor.
I
thought I grew up poor, Viola, until I read your story.
Yeah.
So I will now say, hello.
Viola Davis is one of the great actors of her generation. Having won an Emmy, 2 Tony Awards, and an Oscar, she's the only person of color to achieve the triple crown of acting. When she got her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Davis thanked God for blessing her life with abundance. However, growing up was an entirely different story.
You know, the plaster coming off the walls and always being hungry.
In Rhode Island, in cold Rhode Island.
Freezing, plumbing never working.
As she described in her memoir, Finding Me, Davis's family was extremely impoverished. Besides multiple fires in their apartment building, toilets that weren't functional, and food stamps that couldn't feed everyone, they also lived with a rat infestation that sounds like the stuff of nightmares.
Then we felt like we had to wrap coats or shirts around our necks at night to keep the rats from biting our necks. And we would listen to them.
And they would jump on the bed.
They would jump on the bed.
Number 2, Nickelodeon offered Jeanette McCurdy hush money.
I have said everything that I want to say about that in the book. I hope people, you know what, I hope that anybody whose attention might be piqued by these headlines will consider reading the book, because I've said everything in as articulate and thoughtful of a way as I can manage.
In 2022, Jeanette McCurdy released her memoir called I'm Glad My Mom Died. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've more than likely heard the stories about how her mom was abusive in all sorts of ways.
I've tried to understand, and that didn't lead me anywhere productive. I would just spin my wheels trying to understand my mom's motives.
While the book details her heartbreaking home life, it turns out her life away from home wasn't all candy and roses either. McCurdy writes about the abhorrent behavior of a man at the network, someone she calls the creator, who gave her alcohol and acted extremely inappropriately, to put it mildly. In the end, she also exposes the fact that Nickelodeon offered her $300,000 not to say anything about it.
I just said, no, it's not happening. That sounds like hush money to me. Not doing it, not taking it.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Corey Feldman's story. If you grew up in the 80s, chances are that you were a fan of at least a few of Corey Feldman's movies.
You know, your voice is kind of nice when your mouth isn't screwing it up.
Yeah, well, thanks. And you know, your looks are kind of pretty when your face doesn't screw it up.
From The Goonies and Stand By Me to The Lost Boys, Feldman was a teen fixture on the silver screen in the decade. But according to his 2013 memoir, Choreography, Feldman's teen years off-screen were beset with sexual abuse from an older male assistant.
Yeah, my story in and of itself is fairly tragic. And I did have a very, very rough upbringing. I endured a lot of abuse. I endured a lot of pain in my childhood.
He also tells the story of how his close friend, Corey Haim, and the other half of the two Coreys had similar experiences.
People are ashamed. People have their own secrets. People have their own things that they may have done to me through a course of action that they were hoping would kind of get covered up and go away.